What's good, friends list, episode 89 of the Gamecast coming at you. The T's have been crossed, the I's have been dotted, the ink is dry, which means it's official. Microsoft has officially finalized their purchase of ZeniMax Media, and in turn, Bethesda Softworks. So, now that one of gaming's most popular entities is within the Xbox fold, the biggest question remains, what's next? So, this week, we explore the acquisition of Bethesda, and with it now finalized, what the future can truly look like with the Rockville, Maryland publisher and developer, and not to mention their long list of subsidiaries including id Software, Arcane, Machine Games, and more. When do we expect to see the full backlog of Bethesda titles on Game Pass? Do we envision Bethesda maintaining their identity and have the look of this standalone figure in gaming, even now an acquired position? And, of course, the biggest elephant in the room, what franchises did Phil Spencer mean by saying, quote-unquote, some Bethesda titles will be exclusive to the Xbox ecosystem? Plus, Overwatch is getting some serious next-gen upgrades for the Series X and S. Your original Diablo 2 saves may be coming with you to the new Diablo 2 Resurrected, and much, much more coming up on the newest jam-packed episode of the Game Pass Gamecast.
Now the fun begins.
Rigid.
Stop! You violated the law.
Welcome back to another episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversations around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz, the whole rigmarole I tell you every week, wherever you get a podcast at. And if we're not on that podcast platform you use, let me know. Tweet at us. Let us get at us. And where can you tweet us? Our Twitter. That's at GPGC Podcast to stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like, and our dope giveaways. I'm your host, as always, Travis White, aka Traveless, on most internet platforms. Joining me, as always, my partner in crime, Mike Pepak. Mike, what's good? What's going on? And what have you been playing this past week, my man?
This past week has been another boring week for me, man. I've just pretty much me and Marshy booted up some Killing Floor the other day, so that was fun just to just out of nowhere. He was playing with a couple of his other buddies, so I was just like, yeah, I'll fire that up just because, you know what I mean? And
we need to make Killing Floor a thing again.
Yeah, I enjoy that game so much that I agree. I think we definitely need to get involved on that. So I've been playing Killing Floor, a little bit of Halo, mixing it up with some Age of Empires, just kind of keeping my palate cleansed, kind of waiting for I just feel like there's no good games. This is a perfect time for me to would be the perfect time for me to go ahead and start clearing out my backlog, which would be what any responsible human being would do. But I'm just not. I don't have anything that I'm dying to play. So kind of at a point here where I'm well, I don't know what to do really because there's not much going on for me. You know, game wise.
It's funny you say that because I'm kind of in that same role for the second straight week. My fiance and I started playing through the Uncharted series again. But that's she goes to bed a lot earlier than I do, so it's more of a, hey, we play it at an hour or two clip at a time, not actually sitting down and truly playing something. But that's kind of why I've been sinking into Destiny a little bit, but even that, at this point now, I've put 40 hours recently into it or something like that, but now I'm starting to kind of feel that okay, I've gotten through most of the stuff, even though I'm only halfway through, the season pass or whatever. But, there's other things I kind of am getting or there are other things that are driving me away from that. But I'm kind of in the same boat where it's man, this is a perfect time to start going through my backlog. Cause there's I subscribe to the Humble Choice membership, the humble bundle, if I can get that through, monthly subscription thing. I got a deal for it where it's like $5 a month for like a year or something like that. So I have all these like additional games that have been coming out, plus not to mention like my console games and shit coming to Game Pass all the time and whatnot, that I'm like, oh yeah, I need to go back and play it. Like even just like scrolling through my Steam account right now, like games that I want to go back and actually like sink time into. Divinity Original Sin 2. What else? That was just first on the list that kind of popped up. I want to go back and actually finish The Witcher 3's expansion, Blood and Wine. I like really want to go and do that. Borderlands 3 I want to finish. I want to kind of dip my toe into Dragon Age. Disco Elysium, I feel now is a good time to maybe try that. Cyberhook is an indie game that I've really been wanting to play for a while, that I got from there. Like, there's so many things that I'm looking through, but like, and obviously we're going to go into much deeper depths on this show because it's kind of dedicated to one specific news thing this week because there's nothing bigger than that this week. But like, you know, the news of Bethesda this week, I'm like, man, I kind of want to play Oblivion again.
Right.
like I need to be, like you're saying, a responsible gamer and like go through, or a responsible adult, I should say, who has spent money on all these games that I have and like go through and kind of knock some of them out. But at the same time, I'm like, I know I love Oblivion. I could even start playing through a Skyrim or something like that. Like these, like, you know, it just has that like effect right now, you know, and it might be, you know, the flavor of the week type of thing that's just going on right now in the world of Xbox. But I'm kind of in the same boat where it's like there's so many things that like part of me I'm like, yeah, I do want to go back through and play that. Monster Hunter World's another one. I want to go back in and put more time into Monster Hunter World now. You know, it's stuff like that I want to go back. And Dishonored 2, there's another one. I've been wanting to finish that. I got like halfway through it and was like, I can't remember what came up. I think it was like right when Valorant was coming out and I got like hooked into that. I was like, I'll come back to Dishonored. I'm much more into this right now. But like, I agree. It's just, there's so many things. There's too many games. One, there's far too many good games out there that like somebody like me who has like OCD and anxiety, like, and I'm sure you, Mike, like get that feeling of like, fuck, like sometimes it's like, I feel overwhelmed at the amount of things that there are to play. Not just play, like I'm doing a MCU, like Marvel Cinematic Universe rewatch right now, yet again, like going back to that fucking well. There's how many things I want to actually get caught up on The Walking Dead and things like that, but I'm like, I'm just gonna watch Marvel movies again for the 60th time. But you know, there's just too much good content and too much good media out there right now. It fucking pisses me off. How dare we have good shit? Damn you! I shake my fist. Old man yells at cloud. You know. But anyways, Mike, we got a lot to talk about this week. Specifically, like one thing, but there's a lot within that thing that we got to cover. So let's head into Button Mash for this week. If you're new to the show, Button Mash, where we go over quick hit news stories for the week, get you caught up before we head into our big topics for this week. So, Button Mash kicking it off with Blizzard has quietly rolled out Xbox Series X and S enhancements for Overwatch, a game I love very much, but PS5 hasn't received the same treatment, which I'm sure they will very soon, but...
The PS triple.
PS3 make the best games. The Wii? That should look like a dildo. I wonder how many people actually know Chad Warren. I really wonder how many people... Like, it's people in our age bracket, like... You know, the 25 to 30 crowd who are probably like, I remember that fucker. The original troll. Anyways, though, the news was revealed in the game's March 9th patch notes over on the Blizzard forums in a post which details a series of new performance optimizations coming to the game for next-gen Xbox players. Players are now able to switch between 3 different graphics options mode to suit their preferred playstyle. Resolution, which in the Series X is 4K at 60 frames per second, Series S at 144p at 60 hertz, or 1440. I'm getting myself confused with hertz. 1440p at 60 frames per second. This mode prefers high resolution output at the cost of some image quality. Balanced, which for the Series X is 1440p at 60 frames per second, Series S at 1080p at 60 frames per second, which prefers image quality at the cost of resolution, and then frame rate for the Series X is 1440p at 120 frames per second, or 120 hertz, I guess you could say. Series S at 1080p at 120 hertz, which obviously prefers a higher frame rate over, at the cost of resolution, image quality, and yada yada. You get what I'm saying. But anyways, Fortnite will soon provide players with a new single-player story event that acts as the conclusion to its current season of the Battle Royale. When Fortnite Chapter 2 Season 6 launches on March 16th, the first thing players will be met with is the Zero Crisis finale. Described as, quote, solo experience by developer Epic, it is the conclusion of Agent Jones' mission that formed the basis of the Season 5 story arc. Epic promises that the aftermath of the single-player event will, quote, shape reality as we know it, suggesting that the event will push forward and make changes to the Fortnite storyline. And also, too, Ant-Man is the latest Marvel superhero to arrive in Fortnite, and the teases leading up to his revival were a tiny bit hilarious. The Fortnite team announced that Ant-Man will be arriving in the item store alongside the toothpick pickaxe and Ant-Man's trusty steed, Antonio Banderas, as back bling. Several years after it was initially announced to be coming to consoles, competitive survival title Rust, which we've talked about before a couple weeks ago about this specific news story, at last has a clear release window on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It's coming this spring. Though no specific date has still been given, Double 11 announced today that Rust console debut would take place this spring following an ongoing closed beta. It also showed off a new trailer illustrating the experience on console. Ubisoft has shared more info on the big update coming to The Division 2 in late 2021 at the earliest, including that there will be a brand new game mode and new ways to progress your agent. The Division 2 development team shared the update following on its recent confirmation that more content was on the way and that Title Update 12 was no longer going to be the last major update to the game. While the team didn't reveal too much, they did tease that the new game mode is, quote, entirely new to the franchise. Furthermore, the team is, quote, investigating new ways to progress your agent with an emphasis on increasing build variety and viability. Two of Remedy Entertainment's games will be set in a shared universe, with one being a AAA title and the other being something of a smaller experience. This news comes by the way of an interview with GamesIndustry.biz held by Remedy CEO Tiro Vitala, I believe, who explained what Remedy's multiple development teams are working on. There are 4 teams in total working on 5 different games, and one of those 4 teams is working on 2 titles funded by Epic Games. Quote, when we focused on just creating one single story, I don't think we were utilizing enough of the hard work we did creating the backgrounds for these worlds, Vertala told GamesIndustry.biz. With Control, we took the first step in giving players more reason to spend more time in the world, explore them, and that's been successful. With the project we're doing with Epic, it's in a world where we want players to spend more time in, he continued. There's more opportunities to explore the world and the brand than in one single game. Hogwarts Legacy lead designer Troy Levitt has left developer Avalanche Studios, if I can spit it out, and quit the project following controversy around his YouTube channel. Levitt became the center of controversy 2 weeks ago when journalist Liam Robertson pointed out that the designer had previously uploaded a number of videos in the past, among other subjects expressed support for the Gamergate movement and downplay high-profile cases of sexual harassment. Levitt has now explained on Twitter that he left Avalanche Studios, adding that he has, quote, nothing but good things to say about the game, the dev team, and WB Games. In a follow-up, Levitt says that he felt, quote, absolutely secure in his position at Avalanche, but made the choice to resign. So, good riddance. But we will end on a good end note, Mike, and I know you're going to be happy about this one. Diablo 2 Resurrected players who still have access to their original Diablo 2 save files will be able to use them in the remaster. Wow. Yeah, right? In an interview with IGN Middle East, Diablo 2 Resurrected producer Matthew Sederquist confirmed the news, adding that Blizzard brute forced the feature in and was surprised to find it worked. Quote, back when we were working on the remaster, we wondered if the old save files would work, and we kind of shoved it in there, and surprisingly it worked. And we were like, okay, that's the best feature ever, Sederquist said. This means that players will be able to pick up where they left off if they still have access to these files, with all of the audio-visual upgrades exclusive to the remaster in tow. So, Mike, After ending on that high note and everything we talked about, anything in button mash you want to run back before we get into our big juicy topic for today?
Blizzard giving the update to the series, like the Xbox. It's not anything that's like, it's clearly not anything that's like, oh,
it's on par.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily like we like Blizzard more, blah blah blah. I don't think it's anything that has to, or Xbox. Blizzard, speaking about Xbox, of course, because clearly like Blizzard still has Xbox, like the rights to the rights to like the COD competitive and things of that nature. That's all still on Xbox's side of things. So all things being considered, you look at something like that and you say, oh wow, like that's kind of cool that kind of customization is coming in. So that's kind of crazy to see, and we're finally starting to see like the 120 hertz finally kind of start to get a little bit of love.
And the one thing I did notice too, and what I've heard just over the years and whatnot, it sounds like, and this is a big reason I think why Epic left Fortnite in early access for so long, was because from what I've heard about the process of sending updates to PlayStation consoles, the approval process is so much more rigorous than other platforms, which can be a good or bad thing. And it seems like Microsoft has been much more, I don't want to say like lackadaisical or anything like that, but much more relaxed on, letting the developers push these updates, especially third-party partners and stuff like that. And, when you look at a Fortnite or even Blizzard, Activision, those are, Epic, and, those companies are so just fucking humongous and such big giant entities within gaming that, obviously there's not as much, you would imagine it's not as much background that you have to go through to make sure it's appropriate or something like that, putting stuff into a game, because, these are multi-million publicly traded companies and things like that, that that are doing this. You would imagine they're not going to be doing something too sly, but from what I've heard, it seems like Sony's platform is a little harder to, in terms of their review process and things like that, to go back and go through and provide updates with, because I've heard that anything, if it is early access though, if games remain in early access like Fortnite, you could send updates without, because they just view it as like open dev type of thing, like where you can just edit on the fly, like hot fixes and things like that, where massive updates like this that provide actual, audio visual gameplay improvements on a much higher scale, where this is providing unlocked frame rates and things like that, or to a degree where it's configuring the game files much more specifically to the hardware to allow it to take advantage of that. That to me sounds like more on that end, where it's like, it just makes sense. We hear that, and not with Sony, because it seems like Sony's platform's a little more restrictive with that, with a game that isn't in early access. But continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. So I think that's cool, because we're finally starting to see like the 120 hertz come into play. Now, obviously, Overwatch is like an older game, so maybe we'll see what there is, like what's going to happen whenever you play a little bit of an old, or like a newer game, if it's actually going to hit that 120 hertz that you're looking for. But overall, I think it's a really big deal, just because I think it's really cool that we're finally already seeing what's to come with the 120 hertz. So that's exciting to me. Also, getting to play your old save files with Diablo 2, that's kind of crazy, and obviously a point of interest, because I don't know how many people out there might still have save files going, if you will, but the thing that I'm really thinking about when it comes to this is obviously, hey, if you want to start playing Diablo 2 now, obviously you have that option, because you're going to be able to, if you really want to save your save file, like you're going to have that option, which I think is super cool. And I'm excited that that's something, because I think people will be able to start kind of getting their, sinking their teeth into it a little earlier than what I think people thought they were going to be able to do.
No, definitely. And that, at the end of the day, that's just more, when I see something like that from, somebody like Blizzard, where it seems like, now granted, I never bought it. You did. You may be able to kind of clarify on this a little bit more, but, from what it looks like, both, World of Warcraft 3, the traditional original release, and Reforged are two separate entities, obviously, where it seems like, hey, Activision Blizzard, or I guess say Blizzard being owned by Activision and having, Activision being such a large entity within the gaming industry on a third party, AAA spectrum, that they're obviously having shareholders, being a publicly traded company, and this and that, people to talk to. So they're looking more at profits for a lot of their things, where you could still go and buy Warcraft 3 right now, like the original. And you could buy Reforged, where to me, this made more, where you see something like this, I fully would have expected like, oh no, we're not going to do that. Or, oh, if you want, and even though they have the option, you could change right back to the original, the original graphics within the game, like you can in the anniversary edition of Halo 1 and 2. While you can do that in Resurrected, who knows how much, how faithfully that is translated from the original one, where, maybe there is something with how you play the game, like veteran players like you may not know until you actually sit down with the game and feel it and say, okay, I noticed that this is tweaked a little bit, this isn't as tight, or this or that, I want to, say that doesn't end up being your experience is cool. I could go back and play Diablo 2, but to me, I was waiting for this to be like, oh no, you can't do that. Obviously, we're talking, software technology that is, 20 plus years apart or whatever at this point, that it's like, okay, it probably shouldn't work, but it does. Cool. Yeah, we'll throw it in. Like, that's to me is such it's something that we're not necessarily, at least I feel safe saying this, not necessarily used to seeing from a AAA publisher of that magnitude, or I guess you could say publisher and developer to an extent. So yeah, like, I just think it's just so foreign of recent to see something like that pop up with a large scale AAA, third party publisher developer to allow something as simple as that. I mean, hell, we've even seen stuff with, like, you look at, for example, World of Warcraft, even, sticking with Blizzard, to, hey, if you want to transfer a character or change a character's name or something like that, it costs money, where it's like, yeah, importing a save file should be easy, but I wouldn't be shocked if they were like, oh yeah, if you want to bring that forward with you, it takes a little work on our end, so we're going to charge you for it, where it's like, this you really didn't need to. But so it's just what I'm trying to, I guess, reiterate is it's refreshing to see something like that, where, old heads like us who still have save files from Diablo 2 somewhere, even if it is from us just playing, starting a save last year with Diablo 2, and this comes out and we're like, oh yeah, we should continue that. We can. We don't have to go back and do that. But yeah, it's just refreshing. I mean, it's just one of those things. So, Mike, let's head into our big topic for this week. Single topic, because there's only one big topic really in the world of Xbox that I don't want to say the only thing, but the only thing people care about or whatever, because there's obviously a lot of things people care about in gaming. But the biggest news story, obviously, this week is that Microsoft and Bethesda are finally one. Microsoft finished their acquisition of Bethesda this week. It was approved. Everything was signed off on. The ink is dry. Everything is good to go. So let's check out Tom Warren's write-up over on The Verge to kind of set the scene, because there's a lot of things I want to talk about with Bethesda. Now that it's official, we've talked in hypotheticals before, whenever the news first broke in, I believe it was like September, that, hey, we're going to be, or that Microsoft's like, hey, we're acquiring Bethesda for $7.5 billion. And everyone was like, okay, all right, wasn't expecting that. I remember I was taking a shit at the time, and I saw that, and I was like, well, good thing I'm sitting down shitting now, because I probably would have shit my pants if I saw that any other time. So, but that just boggles my mind that at the price of that. But I digress. Let's just get into it. Let's see. Let's kind of, like I said, let's check on Tom's article here, kind of set the scene for what we want to talk about, because there's a lot of now both solidified. There's answers at the same time to a lot of the questions we had, but also more questions now that kind of pop up as well. So I digress. As always, link in the description, Tom's article over on The Verge. Go ahead, give that a click, give it a read, because we're going to go in full with this one, because there's a lot of really good info. Microsoft has finalized its $7.5 billion deal to acquire ZeniMax Media, the parent company of Doom and Fallout Studio and Elder Scrolls. Come on now, not just those two. Bethesda Softworks. The finalization comes just a day after Microsoft secured regulatory approval from the EU for the acquisition, and it will now bolster the company's first-party Xbox game studios up to a total of 23. Quote, "This is the next step in building an industry-leading first-party studios team, a commitment we have to our Xbox community," says Microsoft's gaming chief Phil Spencer. Quote, "With the addition of the Bethesda creative teams, gamers should know that Xbox consoles, PC, and Game Pass will be the best place to experience new Bethesda games, including some titles in the future that will be exclusive to Xbox and PC players. The deal includes Bethesda sub-studios like Dishonored developer Arcane, Wolfenstein Studio Machine Guns, Doom maker id Software, and the Evil Within studio Tango Gameworks. Microsoft now has 23 first-party game studios compared to Sony's 13 PlayStation studios. Bethesda will now run as a separate business at Microsoft with its existing leadership. This is the same approach Microsoft has used for its recent big acquisitions, including Mojang, LinkedIn, and GitHub. In a separate blog post, Bethesda marketing chief Pete Hines reveals that there won't be any big changes just yet. Quote, "First, let me say that we're not making any landmark announcements or changes right now. As we've all shared, the expectation is that Bethesda Softworks and our studios will continue as we have in the past, just with more support and resources than we've ever had before. Obviously, Xbox Game Pass has been an important initiative for Xbox, and we'll be working on putting even more of our games into Game Pass than ever before. Beyond that, stay tuned. We're just getting started together." Microsoft originally announced its plans to acquire Bethesda in September, promising to honor PlayStation 5 exclusivity commitments for Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo. Games like The Elder Scrolls Online will also, quote, "continue to be supported exactly like it was." Questions have been raised over Microsoft's plans for Bethesda exclusives on Xbox and PC, and Spencer has made it clear today that there will be, quote, "some new titles that will only be available on Microsoft's platforms." Exactly how many isn't yet known, but in the meantime, Microsoft is bringing more Bethesda games to Game Pass later this week. So, the I's have been dotted, the T's have been crossed, the ink is dry, as I said, and Bethesda, ZeniMax are officially owned by Microsoft and part of their gaming division. And while we didn't get that, cut and dry answer to the continued looming exclusivity scenario, that everyone just keeps talking about. That's the one thing with this whole situation of, and we've talked about it before, the amount of people who are PlayStation users who are playing Bethesda games is a very large portion of their, user base. So, how's that going to play out? What's that look like with this? We didn't get necessarily that cut and dry answer we were hoping for, but, we do know that at least some titles will be available only in the Xbox ecosystem, talking Xbox and PC. So what now? Where do we go from here? We know more Bethesda titles are coming to Game Pass later this weekend. We're recording for transparency, recording on a Wednesday. They're supposed to be announced Thursday, I believe. So you'll know probably before this goes live. But, when do we expect, Mike, I guess, let's start the conversation here since we're talking Game Pass. When do we expect to see the majority of the back catalog make the jump? And really with that said, what do you feel is, prime to make the jump within, when we're looking at, because Bethesda's back catalog is quite long, especially when you look at all of their subsidiaries as well, id Arcane, Tango Gameworks, Machine Games, and the alike. Where does the pecking order come with that? What do you see trying to make the, push to come, even in, when we're talking backwards compatibility and Microsoft's commitment to that, how does that work into it? What do you see in terms of the back catalog for Bethesda making its way over here?
Yeah, I think, it's good news for a lot of people that they're committed to kind of producing or at least releasing a lot of the games on both Xbox and PC, because I think that was a worry and a legitimate worry for a lot of the PlayStation folk out there that like, oh no, are we going to get into this place where we're not going to be able to play the games if we don't have Xbox. And I think that's where a lot of it, kind of like I said, a legitimate concern for a lot of folk there from the Sony side of things. And this is great for the validity of Game Pass also, because if you look at it from a point of view of like, oh, well, a lot of the games are going to be released on Game Pass now, a lot of the backlog. And that's something that Bethesda has done before for Xbox, and they're obviously going to do again now that they're partners. But I think the big news and the big things we could take away from this is that it doesn't seem like many of the heavy hitters will be solely on Xbox consoles, which is huge, because when we talk about Bethesda and we talk about the Elder Scrolls in particular, and even Fallout, it's originally a PC thing. It's originally PC games. That's the ecosystem that they were on. So there's no reason for Microsoft to now force them to, make their games only for consoles. So I think that's cool. And also I think it's a big deal because now we can finally go forward, because we haven't, been able to hear a lot of things about Bethesda. We know that a lot of things have been in the slow cooker. And now, hopefully we're going to be full speed ahead getting news about what Bethesda's been working on, what's going to be on Xbox, what's not going to be on Xbox. It's a big deal, and it's great to finally have this kind of behind us. And we finally got to see, what the show or what it's going to look like going down the road, because again, one of the themes that we talked about a long time ago, whenever this was first rumored or first, confirmed, was like Xbox Microsoft could have really, told Sony to stick it where their sun don't shine by saying like, a lot of your games are going to be exclusive, period. We don't care. We don't give a fuck. We own you. You make the games by our rules now.
Right.
And then obviously then there's infighting, and then Bethesda could just make everything grind to a halt, which I don't think anyone wins in. But I do think that this is the most professional way to go forward, and it's going to allow Sony people to get into Xbox. But I would think that like you're going to have Game Pass, which is going to be like Xbox Live Gold, right? Like you're going to have Game Pass to play, but like the new games on the first day or the first few weeks. You know what I mean? I think that's something to look at going forward also.
No, definitely. And I just pulled up the full Game Pass list. Obviously I'm on my PC. If I would have pulled up the Xbox app, it would have only gave me PC ones, but pulling up the full list that includes both, I'm going through and just looking at right now what is on here from Bethesda as of right now, as of Wednesday, before anything else, because we know that Bethesda games have been on Game Pass before. They've had a partnership with them. Microsoft has had a partnership with them. So like looking, Dishonored 2 is on here, Doom Eternal. What else we got here? Fallout 76, Fallout New Vegas. I know Skyrim is on here currently, the special edition of that. But like looking back on that, there's still a decent amount of Bethesda games on here, and they've been on there quite frequently. And so like obviously, like I said, we're recording on a Wednesday. They're adding games tomorrow, supposedly. To Game Pass, some games, that is, I should say, that, I think for sure Fallout 4 is a guarantee. Skyrim for sure is already on there, but that's not clearly going anywhere now. Fallout 4, Doom is going to return, I believe, as well. Doom 2016, because that was a staple of Game Pass for quite a while. I want to say I would feel comfortable saying like The Evil Within 1 and 2, because those games, while I love them, kind of is this franchise that, Tango Gameworks to me is a really, really, really great studio, a really great Japanese studio too, that is going to be great when we're looking at Microsoft wanting to add, more Japanese studios to their portfolio. Like, that's a great first step. And The Evil Within 1 and 2, those games being on the market for quite some time are easy to bring over and get more people into that, those games. While they've sold pretty decently, there's a difference between selling pretty decently and selling enough to justify continuing that series. So hopefully, that's what we see with something like, the funding and stuff that Phil talks about, or not Phil, Pete Hines, I'm sorry, talked about in, his blog post. They'd be saying, what's going to change? Well, nothing really, at least in their eyes, nothing really. We're just going to have more funding and more support than ever, that they can maybe go and make those kind of experiences again. They can continue The Evil Within. They can continue, Rage that, may not have sold that great or reviewed that great, but you know what? There is a community with that, and it's hardcore community, and they want to see more of that. Cool. We have the ability, and now we have the platform with Xbox Game Pass, where even if it doesn't, sell gangbusters physically, digitally, whatever, it's on Game Pass. And if people subscribe to it that day and date, that's great. That's more people in our ecosystem. That's all it takes. So like I said, looking through here, there's already some games on there, but I wouldn't be shocked if Wolfenstein 2 makes a return. I can't remember if the New Order is on here. I'm finally getting to the end. ESO, Elder Scrolls Online, is already still on there. But I could see that too. And I know, Mike, you and I have talked about this before about wanting to get back into that before the Oblivion expansion comes out with Elder Scrolls Online. But I could see them treating that almost similar to their Destiny agreement that they have right now with Bungie, where if you have Game Pass Ultimate, Destiny is on there, but you also have access to all of the current DLC and expansions, that all the current content that is available in Destiny, you have access to with a Game Pass Ultimate subscription. So I could see that like that with the Elder Scrolls Online, where it's like, hey, cool. If you want to just get in and buy the game or whatever, cool, you could do that. If you want to just get in, you only have Game Pass, and you want to just download the standard version, cool, that's fine. But if you have Game Pass Ultimate, that's the best deal, that if you play this game a lot, and I'm sure it's going to be coming to Windows as well, it's going to be available in Game Pass PC eventually, cool. You're good to go. Like, you pay $15 a month. Yeah, you pay $15 a month, which is like playing WoW or something like that, which you don't have to do when playing ESO. But at the same time, you're getting fucking like 300 plus games on top of that as well. So it's not just, and we're talking high quality AAA stuff, that, it's going to be a no-brainer for a lot of those people. But that's where I see a lot of this coming down to, where I eventually see, a lot of their modern AAA stuff being like right away added. Like, I'm saying, like, I wouldn't be shocked in the next 90 days we start, and I'm sure they're going to want to not do it all in one blast, because they want to, kind of, own the messaging of this announcement or this partnership. They want to be able to push this out, I'm sure, at a certain clip, just to keep people interested and whatnot. But at the same time, too, they're going to want to get that stuff out there faster, because that's much easier to get onto the service. When we talk about their even farther back catalog, when we're talking about, a Oblivion, which was on Game Pass for a long time. I don't believe it is anymore, but an Oblivion, a Morrowind, a Fallout 3, New Vegas is on there currently, but, things like that we could potentially see come back onto these platforms or for the first time, and get people interested into them. Especially when we talk about like Morrowind and even Fallout 3, because I'm sure there's, people who love Fallout at this point, but there's a whole new generation that's out there who are going to be experiencing Bethesda games for the first time ever, that, to me personally, an Oblivion, a Fallout 3, a New Vegas, those games, while, now 2 generations old, we're looking at them technically, hold up really well. And I think they're really friendly for those people, for those who are new to the series, who want more Fallout until Fallout 5 comes out or the Elder Scrolls 6 comes out. Cool. It's all right there. Morrowind would be a little bit more of a jump for those who are new, but just because there's no voice acting and things like that, or, well, I should say, there's no scripted dialogue from voice scripted dialogue whenever you're having conversations with people, for the most part. It's all text-based. But at the same time, there's still that whole title out there that you could get into if you're really wanting to get into, the Elder Scrolls universe for the first time. But so, kind of switching gears a little bit, do you think, like, because I was thinking about this, somebody brought this up on a podcast I was listening to before, and because of how this deal is landing, the timing it's landing, we're talking now, it's March 10th when we're recording this. The ink was signed and everything was good to go yesterday, March 9th. As somebody who works in like event management, and I'm starting it this way, granted, we're also not having a live E3 this year, but I kind of come back to what both Phil Spencer and Pete Hines and Todd Howard have said previously that, what does this look like for Bethesda? Like, how are their operations going to change? What is their presentation going to look like? How are they logistically going to fit in with Microsoft, in their other first party studios? So do we envision that, Bethesda's presentation is going to remain similar for what they've had before the acquisition? So, like, I'm saying, like, potentially having their own E3 event still, whenever COVID fucks off finally, and, or at least is under control, and we could have events and hug people and, not worried about passing on the Black Plague. When we get back to that point, do we envision having Bethesda having their own E3 showcase? We're talking, like I was going to say, as an event manager, if we're talking in normal times and, March to June, and we're talking a big major scale event like an E3 in their industry, I mean, that is their Super Bowl for the most part, that it's like 3 months out, we're planning for that, 16 months beforehand, or, 12 months at least beforehand, where things like this, even we're talking September, that's going to be, 6 to 9 months at most that you're planning for these things. Do you envision that, even this year with no public E3, we get an E3 from Bethesda, not necessarily just Microsoft, but where we've seen in the past, hey, Microsoft's going through and doing their presentation this year, their digital event. And just like they've done in the past, hey, the new Fallout plays best on Xbox, and here's Todd Howard. We're going to bring him out on stage for a minute, and he's going to show this, yada, yada. Shows his game. Hey, check back later tonight for Bethesda's event that we're going to go at, like they did for Fallout 76. Do we think, just for an example, looking at that, do you think Bethesda's presentation overall for how they not only communicate with their fans, but operate as a development staff, all of their studios really, do you think much is going to change? Do you think Bethesda is still going to be Bethesda, really, I guess, not now Microsoft? These are just Microsoft studios. Do you think we'll still have that identity as these are Bethesda games, even when we're talking about their original subsidiaries like id with Doom and Arcane and Machine Games and whatnot? Will we still have that emphasis, or will we begin to see these transition into just, they're just more Microsoft studios?
That's definitely a really, really interesting question, and it's also a very interesting thing to consider, because I think you see, a lot of possibilities brewing here when you take a long hard look at Bethesda, just from all the things that are going to be available to them. I think personally, I look at Bethesda and I see a company who was one of the premier game development studios for a very long time, still could be considered one of the premier game studios because of ZeniMax. And I think that they are a little bit different than a run-of-your-mill development studio. Now, with that being said, that's also something like where I consider, like, is id Software or are the other development studios going to, feel good about the fact that maybe they're a little overshadowed by Bethesda, or maybe perhaps, Microsoft's making a little bit of a bigger deal about them. Like, those are all things that, you could consider and maybe think like, oh, wow, that's something that, I didn't really think about, or something that could be completely and totally true. Well, I think that with everything, being said, when all is said and done, you have to take a look at Bethesda, and you look at them and you say, this is a team that has a lot to offer. This is a team that is still one of the premier studios in the world when it comes to game development.
Mm-hmm.
And with those things being considered, I look at it and I say, okay, we're treating Bethesda this way. How is everyone else gonna feel, or are they gonna care? And ultimately, when all is said and done, I think that they will be considered a huge deal, for a lot of different reasons. And they probably should be considered the biggest deal, the biggest fish in the boat, or in the water per se, for Microsoft. And whether or not you like it or you agree with it. It's just something that it's a reality for Microsoft, and it's a reality that Bethesda is the creme de la creme, and that they probably, while I don't necessarily condone like special treatment for certain companies because you're all on one team, at the end of the day, it's hard to ignore their lineage, and you're kind of going to have to say, wow, I expect big things from Bethesda, and I expect Bethesda to be continued to, continue to have their own E3 announcements and things of that nature. Like I expect all that to continue because they are, they're as advertised, man. They're as good as you think they are.
No, I definitely, and I agree. I think we're going to end up seeing, this deal really panning out well for both parties long term. We usually see, sometimes with acquisitions and stuff, like the big thing people always worry about, and they use an example, is BioWare. Okay, well, BioWare was spectacular before, 2007, and then once EA acquired them, that's whenever the ship started sinking. And it's like, well, no, that's not clearly the case. Like, because you have titles like that come out since then, Mass Effect 2, Dragon Age Origins. Dragon Age 2 wasn't as, greatly remembered. And you have Mass Effect 3 being a great title, but, people sometimes question the ending. But at the same time, like, then you start to see kind of a downward trend with what EA looks like. But it wasn't all just like, horseshit right from the beginning. Like it's not. And my thing is that whenever you're looking at somebody like I wouldn't put Microsoft and EA in the same category as, publishers for their games, because whenever you look at Xbox, the emphasis on the games that they are putting out is much higher because it's going to, traditionally you're seeing it for one specific platform. You're not, now granted things have changed with how xCloud is used, and, there's more openness, and those, borders that were put up for console wars and stuff are starting to kind of crumble a little bit. And we're seeing more, coming across the aisle almost, if you want to put it in an antiquated way. But, we're seeing more of that start to happen, but traditionally you're seeing from hardware manufacturers, the games that they're providing, these exclusive experiences, supposedly, that you're going to get, they're designed for one specific platform in mind, where that hardware, you have access to that hardware, you can design a game around one specific piece of hardware, helps tremendously compared to an EA where, hey, they're trying to develop a Mass Effect title, this large sprawling RPG, space opera that they're trying to, make work on 4 or 5 different platforms. That doesn't always work. Where you look at a Halo, you look at, let's just say MCC. And I know there's been some issues or whatnot, but the game seems to be, at least for the broad majority of people who play that game, in a good state, in a state that they're happy. That game was designed for originally one platform in mind, and then PC. Outside of that, that's it. Like, it was designed, it was polished, it was everything done along that end. Same with, any other massive title that you want to pull out. Even if we look back to last generation with, originally The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Like, whenever we look at, or I should say 2 generations ago now, that game was designed to take advantage of the Xbox 360, specifically when we're talking consoles. Of course, there was the PC version, which a lot of people view as, hey, this is the true version of the game or whatever, because this is a PC franchise, yada, yada. But point being, that game was specifically designed around that. And that's why it had so much success and polish and everything, because it was made to take advantage of that. And that's why you always hear people say, oh, the PS3 version of that game, which came out later, is in pretty rough shape, because it's taking all of that code and, design aspects of that engine and making it work in a completely different piece of hardware, especially with the PlayStation 3 having the cell processor, and that being just a shit show to get anything from that console without completely redoing it and remaking it forward into the new generations. But I digress. But point being, like, to me, this makes so much more sense for both sides, where Microsoft is going to be able to tout them as, hey, this is a first party, these are first party studios of ours. But to me, this seems much more, and obviously Bethesda is such a bigger entity than just BioWare alone, where Bethesda's still getting to say, like, no, we're owned by Microsoft, we're doing, Microsoft is our home, but Bethesda's able to just run and actually do something on their own. They're able to actually communicate as Bethesda as a whole, because at the end of the day, Bethesda alone, that name has weight to it in the games industry. That is like saying if Microsoft bought an EA, not to that level, but they have that weight that is more than just a Naughty Dog, where it's just one development studio, which Naughty Dog is, hands down, if you ask me, the best developer going right now in the industry and leading the edge in what games can be done from a cinematic and, narrative perspective. But I digress. In animation too. They're fucking ridiculous. But point being, though, that when you look at that compared to a Bethesda, that is just, we're talking multiple studios, publishing arm, everything like that, and have some of the most, legendary or, legacy IP through Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Doom, Wolfenstein, like, that carries weight. And to them, I'm sure when they're making that call, and ZeniMax is making that call saying, we still want our freedom. We want, sure, you can own us. You could put some of our games on your platforms. Do whatever you want. We don't care about that. We want to be able to make the games we want to make, period. And we want to have our identity as, Bethesda Game Studio or just Bethesda or whatever. We want to be able to hold our events. And I think that's where Microsoft both has the funds to say, okay, cool, if that doesn't pan out and we don't like it, we could sell them or whatever, which I don't think they would do, but
no, yeah. I think like the biggest, the most under the radar thing that isn't being talked about at all when it comes to Bethesda, and it kind of just dawned on me now that this is what's going on for real. Like the biggest thing for me, and this is something where it literally just hit me like a freight train right now. Like Microsoft has been bleeding money when it comes to infinite development. They have been acquiring studios like crazy, spending a metric shit ton of money trying to get their gaming division under control, or at least in a better spot. This is a case where they spent a lot of money up front for Bethesda, and it's going to take a lot of money for this deal to pay dividends. And I don't think it's going to take as long as some people are saying, because there's going to be a lot of income that comes from the Game Pass, especially if it's required to like let's say like the new Elder Scrolls 6 game or Starfall or, every new game that they're coming out with. Let's say that you get it 6 months early if you have Xbox Game Pass. But like you have to get Xbox Game Pass and it's on PC, or, God forbid, like it's going to go on Steam Marketplace, and we already know Steam Marketplace bends the devs over. So, there's going to be a few interesting things that are possible with this development studio. But the biggest thing to me is, this is like securing a future for the Microsoft gaming platform. And let me tell you, what comes to mind for me when I think about this. The reason why this is a big deal is they can literally say to Bethesda, do whatever the fuck you want, but you obviously have to pay us a lot. Like we get a lot of your sales. We're getting a lot of your money because we bought you for I don't know the contract for sure, but business wise, what makes sense to me is Bethesda is the big dog in Microsoft's room. Bethesda makes a lot of the money. They take all of those funds coming in from Bethesda, the Bethesda deal, all the money Bethesda's making for their games, all of that stuff. It all comes to a head because they make a lot of money. Like it's their cash cow, if you will. They let Bethesda do whatever the fuck they want. But in turn, they take that money and they throw it to their new development studios. They throw it to their, the team that's taken over the Rare. God, why is that name flipping? The team that's working on Perfect Dark. Like they can take the money from the Bethesda deal.
The Initiative.
Yeah, they can take all this money they're getting, and they can either acquire new studios, which that's going to take a while because, like I said, the money's not going to be. They're not going to be on the green side of this for a little while, but they're going to be able to take the money they're getting from Bethesda, and it's basically guaranteed income to spend on gaming. Like if they look at it from a one-to-one standpoint, this Bethesda acquisition of Bethesda can quintessentially pay for the rest of their dev studios, and the money that they're making off of like Game Pass and other things and the other dev studios is just like cherries on the top. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's what I think when this deal, that's what I think this deal means to Microsoft as a whole.
Mm-hmm. No, and I totally agree. Where at the end of the day, really, this is brought in for a lot of things. One primarily being Game Pass. This is to drive Game Pass subscriptions. This is Microsoft truly pushing the industry forward in this direction of subscription services and being a viable thing. Because now the viable, like you're saying, the big dog, one of the biggest dogs in gaming right now, with some of the biggest IPs who sell some of the biggest numbers, are now in Game Pass. Like, you can get them directly Game Pass. And sometimes, in some instances, like we're going to talk about soon, I'm sure, you're only going to be able to get them in Game Pass or within Xbox. And that's going to be the easiest way to get them is through Game Pass. So you are going to have to use Game Pass to a degree. That, that's where it's going to me, where it falls back on. But at the end of the day, people are going to Bethesda's going to drive business for Microsoft. There's no question about it. Whether you're a fan of Fallout, whether you're a fan of Elder Scrolls, whether you're a fan of Doom, whether you're a fan of, immersive sims like Prey or something, that's going to, at the end of the day, Microsoft is going to make money on this hand over foot. So with that said, though, like you said, it's going to end up driving, they're going to see, since they're going to be fully owned by them, they're going to have that revenue coming back in. They're going to be able to put that into the initiative. It's only going to help, not just, sure, Bethesda games are going to help the portfolio of, Xbox Game Studios and their output alone on just the games they put out alone, like the Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield and whatnot. But at the same time, the money they're making on those huge titles are going to fund projects like Perfect Dark from the initiative, like, Avowed from Obsidian. And hell, I fully think we're going to see a Fallout New Vegas 2 now that Bethesda's under Microsoft's wing, and so is Obsidian, that's such an easy connection to just make. And there you go. Like, I can fully see that happening, where we can get those smaller projects. And that's where you could see a Game Pass be such a viable option for that, hey, people, there's a certain sect of RPG fans who have been clamoring for this experience for so fucking long. Let's give it to them, and let's put it on Game Pass so they can drive those sales for them. So I totally agree with that. I think this, in so many ways, is such a win for so many different people involved with it, that it just makes sense. And I know for the longest time, Bethesda they were viewed for so long as, I don't want to say the underdog, or they were the developer of the people. They were the developer who spoke most for the gamers compared to, so many of these other big publishers and entities or developers and then publishers and just entities in gaming in general. But, I don't want to say we've seen them stray away, but now they're in that pact with the big fish in the sea, the EAs, the Activisions, the Ubisofts, they're there right there with them. Maybe not to, financially the level of before, but they're still there, and they're still putting on E3 showcases. They're still selling gangbusters on the titles they put out. But I just think this makes sense for so many different parties, and I know that they wanted to stay, ZeniMax in general, I guess, wanted to stay away from that level of, being another Activision or whatever, or being owned by anyone. But this to me just makes far too much sense for both parties, where Bethesda never has to worry about money again, ever. ZeniMax never has to worry about money again. And in turn, if that means they know what they're able to do, and I'm sure I'm sure there's developers within that staff who are saying, man, I really would love to make another entry in this franchise, but I know that won't get greenlit because it only sold X amount. Well, now you don't have to fucking worry about that to a degree. Like, you have a platform that you could just put shit on to a group of people who are going to be paying to, pay the subscription fee. It's like Netflix. I just want to fucking open up Netflix and see what's on there, and I'll pick something out to watch tonight. That happens every night to so many people, and we're getting to that with Game Pass. So a service like that it makes so much sense and so much just this agreement in general, I mean, makes so much sense to so many, this expands so many things for both sides. So with that being said, Mike, and I think these kind of play in together a little bit. How do we think? We know now, like we were talking about before, we know now that at some point, some games are going to be exclusive. You're only going to be able to get them on Xbox or PC. That's all Phil Spencer said. We don't know if that's, he is now on official Xbox record on their website, typing out saying there are going to be some exclusives with this deal that come from this deal.
Mm-hmm.
What do we now think that means? Because, like I said, it answers some question. Yeah, we're going to see some exclusivity, but it adds more questions. Okay, at what level are we going to see that? Are we going to see that as timed exclusivity? Are we going to see that as, these titles get it, but these titles don't? And, with those titles that do, are we talking a Starfield? Are we talking an Elder Scrolls 6? Are we talking a Fallout 5 or whatever? These big franchises that are there where, I think most people who kind of see that may just think, oh, yeah, for sure. It seems like people are either in two camps. Oh, yeah, he's definitely talking about the Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield and this and that. Or they're going to be exclusive and others, we'll get them out to other platforms. Or the other side of the camp of, no, it's going to be like the Dishonored 3s and Prey 2s and, the a little bit smaller titles from some of their subsidiaries are going to be the ones that he's talking about are exclusive. You can only get here. But they'll want to make the money, on multi-plat for all these other titles. So where do you now kind of fall with this? Now that we've had, 6+ months to stew on this a little bit, what, and we hear now some official word that, yes, some of these are going to be exclusive. Where do we now kind of stand with this? What is the outlook looking, moving forward with you at least on what Bethesda titles are going to do with Microsoft and, PC? And do we see those anywhere else?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting discussion to have. I think in terms of like where we go from here, I think obviously, like I said, I'm pretty sure that pretty much all of the games that were going to be like, if you would think like, oh, they're going to be an Xbox exclusive, I'm pretty sure they're at least going to be on PC.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I think that's
Xbox and PC. He said when I say Xbox ecosystem, I mean Xbox and PC. And they've even Phil has even said that in his post that he put out, or his official statement that he put out, saying Xbox and PC exclusivity whenever he's talking about some.
So when we talk about that, I think that, like, I kind of alluded to it in the previous statement I made about this deal and about the news coming from it. But clearly, we're going to see a significant, I think we're going to see a significant uptick in like monthly Game Pass subscriptions and things of that nature. Because I think that, like, if you have a PlayStation and you want to play the latest Bethesda games, you're gonna have to, pony up and pay the piper, if you will. And that's Microsoft's right at this point in time. And I think it's great that they're doing an exclusive type. They're doing like an exclusive type releases on games without, totally barring certain platforms from play. Well, they are barring platforms from playing them, I guess. But the biggest thing to me is
to keep in mind too, and not to interrupt you, but they're still honoring, Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo as timed exclusives with PlayStation, with the PS5. They're still honoring those when they release later this year or whatever. Like, they're not pulling those out and saying, no, we're taking our ball and going home. They're saying, no, we're going to honor those. That's cool. They can be PlayStation exclusives for a year. That you had that before. Go ahead. That's fine. They're not being, like I said, they're not lawyering up or taking their ball and going home. Go ahead.
So, yeah, to me, it's like, it's going to be it's a really good thing for Microsoft. I don't know how it could ever be a bad thing. Yeah, it might be something that, like, people were like, oh, well, I thought they were going to try to do something with the consoles to try to keep the consoles selling well. But I mean, I don't think that was ever really in the cards for them, to be honest. I think it was always going to be this way. And I think it's a big deal. I think it's really cool that they are going to, basically let people, if they want to play Bethesda games, you're going to have to play it on PC, and that's okay if you really want, because I know a lot of people have gotten PCs, and that's cool. I think it's nice because you look at the Sony PlayStation, and they don't have a deal like this where Xbox players can play their PlayStation games. You know what I mean? So I like what they've done, and I think that their messaging with the Xbox Series X and going forward with the gaming division has always been like kind of like they're pro players, and I think this is like the proof is in the pudding with this thus far.
Mm-hmm. So do you see? Let's talk big fish now. Let's talk Bethesda proper games that are coming out, not subsidiaries, not anything like that. Let's talk Elder Scrolls 6, Fallout 5, and then obviously first and foremost, it's coming out the soonest, at least that we know of, next in the pipeline. It's been confirmed, Starfield. So, let's talk Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6. What do we see with those? Do you think this is going to be the deal that says, or when he's talking about this exclusivity and everything like that, do we see those end up on platforms that aren't PC and Xbox? Or is it more so the smaller fish? Do you think it's somewhere, me personally, I think we will know the full extent of everything that happens with this exclusivity deal when we see Starfield. Because shit, I had to burp there. Holy shit. Because that's going to really, really, really set the tone. If we come out, because I personally think, from what it sounds like and what we've heard on the title, how Bethesda likes to keep their cards close to their chest whenever it comes to revealing games. They don't like to reveal games until they're pretty much ready. And we're talking, you look back at really since Oblivion, for the most part, they've kept that track record of, hey, we'll talk about it in like we're going to talk about it 6 months later, it's releasing. So that's commendable to a degree, especially now as we live in a post cyberpunk world where we've seen how this title was pushed back, and they probably did talk about it too early. I'm one of those people who I just appreciate transparency, whether it's, hey, we're working on this game and it's not coming out for 8 years, or, hey, we're not going to talk about this game until it's ready. Either way, that's totally fucking fine. Like, if that's the case, it's the transparency level of it. But, so I think, I really think from everything we've seen that we potentially could see Starfield this year. I think from all the smoke that we've gotten, all the now slowly leaked imaging that's come out and whatnot, and granted, that stuff, like, happens fucking for everything, like we just talked about last week with Elden Ring, and it sounds like that game is not coming out this year. And what we saw was definitely older footage from what it was at now, from a lot of people who are close to the project have alluded to. So, I just truly think from the release schedule, this announcement of when this deal was taking place, their choice to not talk about anything yet because, stuff isn't ready. But if we want to think, truly, when we're talking Starfield, we've now not seen or heard of it in 3 years when it was first teased. And to Todd Howard's credit, he said, we don't usually do this. We don't usually talk about stuff until we feel confident it's ready or whatnot, but we wanted to change up the pace a little bit. And they did say, and I think I had a feeling they knew the state of Fallout 76 whenever they announced that, as well as their other big non-Bethesda game studio developed title was Rage 2 that year, in much like a cult, coming for a successor to a cult classic, quote unquote, if you want to say it, or cult hit that they had. So it's a little different whenever they're saying, okay, we got to have something to pump in there and say. But in both really Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6, what we were shown were literally just like quick 30-second cinematic in a fucking JPEG of the logo or like some font, and that's it. But we've seen more and more slowly start to trickle out with Starfield, because I think Starfield, realistically, what they did in 2018 to announce, quote unquote, officially announce that game, I think was set up to announce that year before in 2017 with a lot of like different things that they had going on with how they presented at E3 and whatnot. It had space themes to it and whatnot that I think they pulled it because of certain aspects of it not being ready or whatnot. I digress, but I think this game's been in development long enough that it is ready to probably be revealed. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see this with how they're holding their stuff to their chest, because I think if this game was still a little ways out, we wouldn't have heard anything from Starfield, like no name drop or anything, or if anything, we would have seen a, hey, we're working hard on it and we'll talk about it when it's ready. Where we've gotten now, you're going to hear from us later this year. Like, we've gotten those statements of, like, we have stuff we're ready to talk about, not today, but you will hear from us very soon type of statements. To me, that indicates, at least for the time being, that I think this game, they're at least in their mind internally for a release date, is saying, hey, we're looking at November, whatever, 2021, or what, you know what I mean? It's going to be their holiday title, their holiday release that they have out. So I think we will know, in Q4 this year, what we're getting in terms of this Bethesda deal. Because if Starfield is exclusive, and I think they could come out and make that and say, I could very well, like, I would not be shocked at all if they come out and say the best place and only place to play Starfield is in Xbox's ecosystem. You can play it on Xbox, PC, and PC it'll be available on Game Pass. It'll be available on Game Pass day one for console and PC, but if you want to play it on PC, you can play it on, get it on the Windows Store, and you can get it on Steam or whatever. I'm sure all of these games on PC will be on Steam. Like, if they're not, Microsoft definitely paid more than $7.5 billion for them in some way that we don't know, because Bethesda games on Steam just do uber numbers at all points. So to me, though, we will know everything I think we need to know about this exclusivity deal when we see Starfield played. Because Starfield, they've touted this as their first original IP since the Elder Scrolls, period. I mean, because Fallout's not their original IP. They bought that from Interplay, and boom, now they have it. But to me, that's going to indicate everything, because they're putting Starfield up as their third pillar of their major franchises that they are Bethesda proper games developed. Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and now Starfield. So I think that's going to tell us everything about this. And I think we're going to hear about it this year. Like, I really do. I think, I think we may have heard about it last year, if I'm being honest, if COVID didn't happen. But COVID happened, and, shit went awry, and rightfully so to a degree. And, now we're here where we are. So to me, I just think this is going to tell us everything we need to know about exclusivity. And I think it probably is going to be, I used to be in the camp of, hey, Sony's going to, or there's too many Sony users to go out there and say, hey, we're going to alienate them, and a platform that you've been playing these titles on forever now, for the past 10 plus years, we're no longer going to provide you with that. I could see, to me, I'm starting to get more into the camp of Microsoft now paid $7.5 billion fucking dollars for these titles. Yeah, I could see Elder Scrolls and Fallout and Starfield, their big tentpole titles, being exclusive to Xbox, because the numbers they would get off of that alone on Game Pass subscriptions, because this all circles back to Game Pass, is just asinine. It's just stupid. It's just absolutely stupid how much money they would make via Game Pass because of that, or how many subscribers, or long term, I guess I should say, because I'm sure they'll get in for $1 or whatever type of thing, and once they forget to turn off reoccurring subscriptions, and they're $15 a month, they're gonna rake in the dough on these people, and rightfully so, because it's a great platform and whatnot. But I digress. Mike, let's head into party chat as we wrap up the episode this week. If you're new to the show, Party Chat's where we propose one question at the end of each week that we want to discuss with you. It could be as simple as, what's your favorite story beat in a game? What have you been playing during this shithole of a pandemic? Or, a little bit deeper, what's the negative stigma of game, or why does the negative stigma around gaming still exist? And things like that. And how can we answer mental health questions within gaming? And after answering ourselves, we'll kick it over to you to tweet your responses to the question over on our Twitter at GPGC Podcast, or our email at bonusaccessory@gmail.com, and we'll read some of the responses the following week. Last week's question: do you ever see xCloud becoming more popular than traditional console gaming in the Xbox ecosystem? And Frank L said, no, unless Microsoft finds a way to connect with the Japanese market due to the massive enrollment in cloud gaming in that market. That's an interesting point of view. So, Mike, this week's question, Microsoft has stated that they have games releasing this year that are unannounced. I can't remember who it was. It was on the Iron Banner podcast. I can't remember. It wasn't Aaron Greenberg, but a Microsoft executive stated, saying, whenever was asked, he was asked, hey, what games from Xbox, what Xbox games this year are you most looking forward to coming out? And he said, well, not all the games that are from Xbox or have been announced yet for this year that are coming out this year. So pie in the sky type of thing, what established IP, a previous IP that was on the Xbox platform, could be Xbox One, 360, original Xbox, the OG, what established IP would you like to see brought back within those games that they supposedly haven't announced yet this year? What would you like to see come back as a title in this generation?
Ooh. So this is like outside of stuff that's already been re-released, right? So we're looking for like brand new stuff they're talking about. I would say,
I mean, it could be, you could do remakes, remasters, whatever.
I say like the remaster, like the news of like all the Ninja Gaiden stuff that's coming out is pretty encouraging for me, because I'm a huge Ninja Gaiden fan. And I think that it's really awesome that they are, even though it's the Sigma versions, which are kind of less desirable, if you will, I'm super pumped for that. So I think that that's a little bit of a bigger deal than what, a lot of people may have let on, just because I feel like it was something that went under the radar with it being Soulsborne-y and things of that nature, even though I really don't think it is. I would love to see I want to see Ninja Gaiden come back. Like, I want to see like a real Ninja Gaiden game come back and actually be, released. I want to see the real deal. That's the game that I would say that I want to see come for sure.
Which does suck that we hear about Team Ninja and them saying, oh yeah, we're working on a new IP. Well, it's not Ninja Gaiden, but I think a lot of people were hoping after, which no shot at Neo or anything like that, because that answer that definitely gave a lot of fans, I think, of that genre and that style of game, a lot of, hey, that scratched a little bit of the itch that we had for that. But I think a lot of people were like, that's great. We love that you explored a new IP and did something new. Maybe make another Ninja Gaiden title too while you're at it. So, that sucks that we've now seen that and heard, oh, it's not that. But that doesn't also mean that we could, not get more, especially too, if, and granted, this isn't necessarily going to happen this year, but this is just me thinking out loud. But sure, if the Sigma versions of these games sell well in this collection that they're selling, who's to say that there won't be more of that done? Who's to say that the Black Collection won't be done or something like that? That could be sold. So me personally, and I was trying to really think about like what I liked in terms of the original Xbox and 360 and whatnot. The one thing I would like to see, because I'm pretty sure the Coalition, from what I remember, has multiple projects in the pipeline. Obviously, one not being Gear 6. Gear 6 obviously is in the pipeline. That's not happening this year. We would have heard about that by now if that is something that is coming out, because of the amount of money put into marketing behind that alone. We would have heard about that. But I would like to see another Gears remaster in terms of Gears 2 being remastered. A game that now is, it would be its 13th anniversary, something like that, 12th anniversary, something like that. That I think that with how well the Gears Ultimate Edition did when it first was released, last generation, and how well received that was and how many people bought that, the tie-ins with, console bundles and whatnot, like it was very successful and a lot of people really enjoyed it, that I'm shocked that we never got another one. That it seemed like, okay, now that we've had those games we've had the original versions of those games on Game Pass for so long, it can be kind of piecemealed, almost seeing like how MCC has slowly migrated towards PC, or I should say, ported over to PC, where it doesn't have to be like that with the Gears franchise, that they could, or it doesn't have to be a one and done type of thing. They can take their time bringing these over, and slowly having more of a Gears platform available. Now, I don't think that's going to happen this year. I would like to see that happen. But I also wouldn't be shocked if we see some kind of release from Forza Motorsports. Like,
Forza?
I shouldn't say Motorsports, but the Forza franchise in general, whether that is some kind of new version of Horizon 4 or something like that. Any kind of racing title is really, especially we're looking at launch window, like first year of a console that comes out, are always such great tech pieces to show. Especially too, if we're talking, it sounds like Forza Motorsport, the new one, because I think they're dropping the 8. I think they're just not rebooting, but like maybe a soft reboot or something, just moving away from that branding and saying, hey, this is now this, just Forza Motorsport, and making a platform maybe type of thing. Who knows? But if they're doing that, I could see, something like that happening with potentially, and it sounds like they're making that title specifically for next gen, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be supported with the Xbox One generation. So if that's the case, I could see something filling that hole of, hey, this is both, Xbox One compatible, but it's enhanced for Series S and X. Now, who knows if that is some kind of spin-off to the spin-off of Horizon? Like, who the hell knows? But I wouldn't be shocked. It wouldn't shock me in the least little bit if we got something from, Playground Games that is a smaller experience that deals within Forza type of thing. But I digress. Mike, I think that's going to do it for our episode this week. Why don't you tell people where they can find you on the interwebs to talk about all the nerdy shit we talked about today, including a whole hell of a lot of Bethesda stuff.
You can find me on Twitter at TOYSXLDIER. That's Toy Soldier, and the second O is an X. Or you can find me on Twitch at MP_Toy Soldier.
Nice. And as always, I'm your host, Travis White, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms, including at Travelus_ on Twitter. That's TRAVLESS_. You can also find me streaming time to time on twitch.tv/Travelus_, same as Twitter. And if you want to play some games with me over on Xbox Live, you can do so at just regular Travelus. That's TRAVLESS. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has been your newest episode of the Game Pass Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox Game Pass, and PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all of that jazz I tell you every week, wherever you get a podcast at, and follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast. Stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like it, our dope giveaways. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for our episode this week. Thank you everyone so much for listening, sharing, and being a part of our growing community. Game on, wash your hands, listen to the doctors, Black Lives Matter, and we will see you next week.